Disclaimer: this video is of humorous nature only. The author does not seek to insult or humiliate anyone. The video may contain profanity. People under the age of 16 should refrain from watching this video. Story 1. She contacted an ex-girlfriend who we found out had breast cancer. They met for lunch and started hanging out without me knowing it. Then she tells me that her and the ex-girlfriend had worked something out where I would get back with the ex so she could be happy. And then, after she passes away, we would get back together again. There was a bunch of weird stuff before that, but this one took the cake. Story 2. Money would disappear from time to time, like as soon as I had saved enough for something important. I was very young and couldn't really connect that he would do this to me, to us, when it seemed we were both working so hard toward big goals. The last straw was when another $2K stash disappeared and I wouldn't let it go. I demanded he tell me where it went and he said, "If I don't want you to know something, you will never know." Story 4. She smothered a quail to death on our back porch while I was at work and told me about it in excruciating detail when I got home. She was in vet school and described how she put her stethoscope on the bird's chest and listened to its heartbeat stop as she held its beak closed and covered the air holes. We weren't married, luckily, but damn, she was nuts. We never had a real conversation after that. I just moved out as soon as I could. She's a veterinarian now, and that really disturbs me. Edit. I'm severely regretting sharing this story on Reddit now, but a few points of clarification. Just for the record, I'm a woman, not a man. When I moved out, I blocked her number and didn't tell her where I moved to. I have no idea where she is living or practicing veterinary medicine. I just know that she did graduate from vet school. She was not a vet when this happened. She claimed the bird hit our window and she was putting it out of its misery. I don't believe smothering it was the most humane way to do that. She also enjoyed telling me about it and making me uncomfortable, so even if she was doing the bird a favor, she's a creep. I can't report her 6 years after the fact for something she did before she even became a vet, even if I knew where she lives, which I don't. It would be my word against hers, and she comes from a wealthy family who would help her lawyer up, and nothing would happen. I don't really appreciate people criticizing me for not reporting her at the time when I was trying to get out of an abusive relationship and rebuild my life. Also, again, it would be me saying it happened and her saying, "No, it didn't." Story 5. He called the cops on me because I ran out of the house with our dogs in the middle of the night and drove away, thus kidnapping his dog, because he held a gun to my head. The cops loved hearing that one. The dog I kidnapped 5 years later is still my perfect shadow and the bestest, most smartest girl. Story 6. When he went on a business trip and asked his 17-year-old brother to stay with me because I had a sick infant. I told his brother that my husband admitted he cheated on me. He hadn't actually told me, but I had a hunch. Then his brother said, "Oh, good. I'm so good he told you because I knew you guys couldn't make through this." I gotta say it was a little creepy when he showed up to a high school party drunk, especially when I saw he was getting a BJ from someone I was in school with. I mean, she was 16 and he's 28. That's when I made a plan to get the duck out of that marriage. I didn't tell him I knew until we separated, and he asked if we could pretend to be married and live together until our kid graduated high school. Story 7. This thankfully happened 6 weeks before we were supposed to get married. But the following happened. 1. Spent a year both agreeing to a prenup only for her to decide to not want to do it after finding out I was going to inherit some money from a recently deceased relative. 2. Gave me a 3-page list of demands including things such as her mom and brother living with us while seeing any of my family members more than once a month was spending too much time with them. Story 8. Ooh, this is question for me. My ex-husband was a bad man and definitely crazy, could say so much here, but the final straw is the question asked. So, from shortly after we met, he told me he had a deceased son, and that not many people knew as he didn't like to share it. He said the child passed away age 4, and that he had had him on holidays as he wasn't really with the mother anymore. But they'd had many memories. He told me everything about this kid, his favorite toys, his hobbies, his birthday and death day, his full name including 2 middle names. He had a tattoo for his son. Pictures. Everything you'd expect, really, without demanding someone to show you cold, hard proof. We even drove 9 hours to visit his grave, but never actually went to the grave as my ex broke down crying. In fact, when our bio child together was born, we attempted to list him as her sibling on the birth certificate, but we weren't allowed as I wasn't his mother, and there was no half-siblings allowed to be listed. But there was loose threads. Things that didn't make sense. It was hard to demand proof, and people don't tend to lie about deceased children, and it's a hell of an accusation, but eventually I did. Too much to explain, but this son never existed. And I spoke to the supposed mother, and she said, "Why does he keep doing this? We don't have a son dead or alive." He did eventually admit it, after trying to make a fake profile for his ex who he claimed was the mother, and tried to message me on there as her to convince me. Didn't work. That was the last straw, made my escape with my daughter a week later. Needed some planning. Never seen him again, thank God, got full custody. Story 9. He didn't believe he had broken his favorite glass during a tirade the night before. And when our 8-yo said, "Dad, you did. You even said the F word," he pointed at the child and began screaming, "That's who needs to be on medication, not me." No, Mother Ducker, your years of bullcrap treatment end the moment you invoke our children in it. Story 10. Being followed around the house being screamed at because she thought I was cheating on her with one of my employees who I hadn't yet met in person and worked 6 hours away. When I left the house to get some work done, she called my phone over and over, around 100x, filling my voicemail with barely intelligible, extremely loud rants. Story 11. Not me, but my uncle. He divorced his wife after she smashed his windshield with a shoe heel after an argument, or maybe after someone said something to her during a family dinner and she jumped over the table and ran away. They divorced when my cousin was little, 5 or so years old. He passed away at 21 years old, and after years of no contact, my uncle had to resume communication with his ex to figure out burial and stuff. And yes, she was just as crazy. Where we live, when a person is buried, a wooden cross is installed first, and then, after the ground settles, a gravestone can be erected. My uncle bought a good cross and installed it, but she removed it and installed a different one as a matter of principle. Later on, she had a gravestone installed, and apart from her son's last name, which was my uncle's last name, she added her own maiden name in parentheses to show that her son belonged to her as well. You would imagine she visited the grave often, but she actually soon got a boyfriend and moved away. Story 12. Thankfully never got married, but the time we had a polar vortex and I closed my business for the week, invited my then partner to where my friends and I were hanging out. He left me on read, so I went home and went to sleep. After a full day of wildly abusive messages about how he was sure I cheated on him, we literally lived less than a block from each other. He broke into my house with a gun at 5 a.m. and demanded to go through my phone. Story 13. He came home from work, threw his wedding ring at me, packed a bag, and said he was leaving with his online hussy. My description, not his. Walked out, went and got her, with her kids screaming and crying, and they left. The aftermath was hell to clean up as we'd been renting a big house, and I had to get rid of everything and move. Afterwards, all my female friends were messaging me, asking why he was sending the messages saying he'd had a dream about them. He was still with her. I'm sure he's still doing it to this day. That was over 20 years ago, and he looks horrible now. They're still together. Story 14. She joined a cult that said Mary Magdalene and Jesus were on their way back to Earth in a spaceship. Upon my divorce, I commemorated it by taking an artistic rendering from the cult's webpage of Jesus in a spaceship above Earth and captioned it, "Space Jesus Saves All." Thank you, Space Jesus, for helping me see the light. Story 15. When I was accused of having invisible people hiding in the walls and somehow giving them oral intimate in front of him. We were together since we were kids, and I had a medical misdiagnosis that made me disabled and dependent on him. I guess he couldn't handle it, and he started doing a lot of coke and he developed schizophrenia. I try to joke now, but it's terrifying not being able to get away from someone like that, and I'm partially paralyzed, so I couldn't fight back. Last straw was actually when I was in the shower and he came in with a knife trying to stab this person I was obviously cheating on him with. This was actually about a month ago. So much PTSD. I may starve to death, but at least I don't have to defend myself against invisible people. Edited because I didn't think I would get this much attention, so I gave more details. Story 16. When she just would not stop spending. It drove me nuts. The last bit was after I had taken family finances back over, gotten everything under control, rebuilt credit, and finally had things straightened out. No more utilities getting shut off, no more evictions. Hell, we were homeowners. I added her onto my longest-held credit card with the explicit instructions that this was for building credit and emergencies. Don't spend anything on it. 3 days later, I get notified that the card is over the halfway point. I tell her again to only use it in emergencies. A week later, it's maxed out. I started making plans then, but she beat me to it. I got a text. I finally figured out what to get you for our anniversary. I hope it makes you happy. Surprise divorce papers served the next day. It took a year to finalize, during which time I moved 1,200 miles away, but still paid her house and car payments. She was awarded both, but specifically told she was responsible for the payments and had to pay me for my half of the equity in the house, and I had to make my payment to the state. 6 months later, the house is in foreclosure, the truck has been repoed, my credit is destroyed again, and she's begging me to fix it all. Unfortunately, I missed the part where my support offer was backdated to the filing date, so was immediately subjected to 600 weeks of withholding and can barely afford my own bills. She won't sign off on that even for my equity in the house, so she's about to be homeless. Our daughter already moved to be with me at Christmas, and I'll likely end up with the boys too. Everything I worked so hard for is gone now. Story 17. Story 18. Story 19. I forget what prompted it, but we were having some playful back and forth and the topic of cheating came up. She looked at me, suddenly dead serious, and said, "If I cheated on you, you would never know." Despite the fact that we lived together and our daily routine involved my dropping her off and picking her up from work, she was convinced I was somehow cheating on her. Like when? On my lunch break? After we split, I looked back and figured there was a lot of projection going on. But that comment she made never sat right with me. Story 20. He started kiting checks all over town and got caught. I found the life insurance policy he took out on me for $500,000 and forged my signature on, and I found out he was cheating, and he planned to leave me and the kids with no car and in a house that was about to be foreclosed on. I had him served the next week. He cried when I made him take the house, but not that I was taking our sweet children. Story 21. He shot a hole through 3 rooms of our house. The bullet lodged in drywall a couple feet above where my head would go during sleep. He had chronic pain, took opiates and sleeping pills, and mixed a few too many to remember what happened. I had been working on leaving and had actually started to move a few things out, but the accidental discharge that I found when I got home from work was the real motivator for getting out of there. Story 22. Years of alcoholism. Severe untreated ADHD, probably some narcissism too. The first year was okay. The next 6 were bad. I tried so hard to help him and fix him. Did literally everything for him. Washed every dish and cooked every meal. Finally had enough people that I cared about tell me how I wasn't in a great situation and got the hell out. That was 2 weeks ago. He's making it so much worse than necessary, but we have a daughter, so I just have to put up with it and ignore it for now. Best part is, I went out last night to enjoy an evening, saw one of his friends, and he called me a call girl. LOL. Story 23. I was at my Bills soccer game with my sister, who my husband hadn't let me see in over a year. He knew the address of where I was at and who I was with. But he lost his mind when I wasn't home when he got off work, sending threatening texts and calls. I asked my sister and Bill to follow me home. Turns out he was sitting in his car with the headlights off nearby. He pulled out soon after we did and followed us for miles, trying to slam into my car and push it off the road. Story 24. WTF Man. Some of these stories are absolutely hair-raising. When I saw crazy in the title, I thought it just meant neurotic. Like when my wife has one of her downbeat depressive episodes and she needs constant reassurance that she's a worthwhile person. The people you're describing sound like psychopaths. Story 25. Wasn't married, but recently broke up with her after she ruined a 10-year friendship I had with a girl because she suspected us of cheating on her. Note that we were long distance and I was over 2,000 kilometers away from my friend, who also lived in the same town as my then girlfriend. I'd shown her my entire chat logs and every communication I've ever had with my friend to prove there was nothing between us, but she would still tell me I was lying and hiding everything. I'd called my friend 3 times in the 16-month relationship with my partner, and apparently that was too much. I wasn't allowed to see my friend when I'd flown down, even with my partner by my side, because she kicked up a stink when we were outside my friend's house and made me choose between us two. She absolutely hated my friend for no reason besides her looks, and would constantly make up scenarios about the two of us and refused to listen when I'd tell her that literally none of what she was saying would happen. As a result, I'd never talk about my friend to her, yet she would constantly bring her up in arguments all the time. It came to an end when my partner mentioned her in an argument, got so angry and threatened to break the windows of my friend's house, drove to her house and sent me a photo from outside her house. She refused to leave until I had sent a message to my friend that she wrote. And when I sent it, my friend blocked me on everything and a 10-year friendship down the drain. Then, after I broke up with her, she would constantly tell me that I chose my friend over her, and that I always did. No, it's just not normal to threaten your partner with anything of those sorts regardless of who it was. She is honestly crazy and would always find excuses when I tell her she needs therapy to heal from her traumas. I've had her blocked for about 2 weeks now, and I'm always on edge because I hope she doesn't actually do something or fly to me to try do something. But I wouldn't put it past her. Story 26. I didn't really snap out of it and realize how insane everything was until I saw how her behavior negatively affected my kids. Once I saw that, and I had a heart-to-heart with my daughter, I literally never went back home again. Edit. To add clarity. The woman was not their mom. I left with both of my kids and never went back. Their mom and I have a great co-parenting relationship, and I consider her a friend. Story 27. I went to therapy to sort out my crap. I suggested she also go to therapy to sort out hers. I was hoping that we might also go to couples counseling, but after her first session, she came out scoffing. She couldn't handle one session of therapy without casting it off. I knew that day when we walked out of our individual therapies together, I was going to divorce her. Then she got pregnant. It took 2 years from that moment to finally pull the plug. Edit. People. Of course I had responsibility for getting her pregnant. I was young and foolish. I didn't know how marriage worked, let alone using 2 forms of birth control. My kids are out of high school now. It's old news. And if you asked my ex, I was a horrible, emotionally abusive piece of crap. So I'm not trying to get sympathy from strangers. I was foolish. I got humbled. Now I've grown. Just to prove the point of my own youthful idiocy, the reason it took 2 years was because I got her pregnant again after our first was born. And by that time, we were both utterly miserable in the marriage. I felt like I was the only one who could see it. I wasn't innocent, though. I was an asshole. For every complaint I make about my ex, she could volley an equally damning complaint about me. Story 28. When she spent 20 KLIs on our credit card without telling me while having an affair with her boss, then sold all of our crap after I took the dog to go stay at my mom's, then moved in with a guy in New Jersey. Flash forward to her mother calling me 3 months later, after no contact, telling me she ended up in Eastern Europe on a manic break and I needed to go do something. That was the final straw after the other final straws. She was officially diagnosed bipolar 1 a few months later, after years of begging her to get evaluated. Although it probably should have been when she gave my cat away when I was out of town for work for 2 days. To be fair, It was a Hemingway cat that only liked me and would bite the crap out of anyone else. I'd trained it to crap on the toilet with probably a 70% success rate, but with more time, we could have gotten it up to like 98%. I'm pretty confident. Story 29. I was expected to go back to bed because she on the couch wanted to sleep in. That exploded into another argument because I didn't follow her whims again. I had already said, "One more senseless fight and I'm gone." This is after the 2 instances of physical abuse with witnesses. After 3 weeks of not taking her meds the doctor prescribed, they would balance her out and she wouldn't end up in the behavioral ward again. After a month of fighting every time we saw each other, except when she wanted me to buy her food. After 18 months of walking on eggshells around her to not give her a reason to start fighting. After years of lies and cheap manipulation, I gave her far too many chances to change. I am not sorry to be done with her. Story 30. After years of arguing about feeling like everything, but especially friends were prioritized over me, I moved out the 5th time she told me to pack my crap and GTFO that she wanted a divorce. We were, quietly, no one knew, trying to work things out. We'd set a date by which we were going to tell our friends that things were going better, so we could start the process of moving back in together and all that jazz. Things seemed to be going very, very well. We were being vulnerable with each other in ways we hadn't for a long time. We were being receptive of one another's issues. She took responsibility for a lot of the ducked-yo crap she did. I only ouchie there, because I'd always taken responsibility. She was constantly gushing about how much she loved me. She was so happy we were working things out. She couldn't wait for me to move back in, etc. Our initial breakup caused a split in our friend group, and while the people on my side didn't hate her, but rather thought she needed mental help, we all believed her crafty behaviors were due to anxiety that she refused to treat. The people on her side absolutely hated me, and anyone who continued to associate with me. A week before we were due to tell our friends, she asked if we could delay it because she was scared to tell her friends. That was it. Found out later that one of the friends she was scared to tell was a coworker she'd gotten really close with, and I'd had suspicions they were seeing each other in those last couple weeks. I learned recently that I was right. The other friends were just the people she did massive amounts of cocaine with all weekend. Every weekend. Story 31. Not me, but a close friend. His wife was 8 years older than him, but acted like a senior citizen. He was like 30. She wouldn't go put with him or us anywhere because she didn't want to miss Jeopardy. Then she was always commenting that he would be happier with someone younger. He was actually quite happy, but it seemed she was always trying to push him away. One time when she did come with us to the bar, she was trying to hook him up with my wife's sister, who had recently gone through a breakup, saying she would be perfect for him. Eventually, they finally split up, but then she hired a private investigator to follow him for over a year to report on what he was doing and who he was seeing. She emailed me with her report and to ask me if there was any hope of them getting back together now that he has sowed his oats. The bitch be crazy. Story 32. A neighbor who we'd pay to mow our lawn came by and she answered the door bottom half nude. She'd been civilly committed before and had been having a number of weird episodes ranging from her acting like a scared child, being catatonic, or being violent. So I asked her for my feeling of safety if she could chill in the bedroom for 20 minutes until whatever passed. 5 minutes later, I hear her screaming for help and rush in to find that, for some reason, she decided to try to jump out the window head first, with about a 6x drop into a really prickly bush, to escape being locked in the bedroom, because she was too out of it to open a door, and thought that meant I locked a door that had no lock on it. Fortunately, she got caught halfway through and I was able to pull her back in, but then she immediately started attacking me, and I could barely keep myself safe while pushing her on the bed so I could get distance between us. I ended up arranging a trip down to her dad's for her with some mutual friends so we could both have some space. My breaking point, though, was 2 days later when we were talking about reconciling, and I was saying she needed to take her meds. But then she insisted she didn't need to, and that she wouldn't want to get back together until I admitted all the times she'd physically assaulted me were justified, and that I'd worked with police to forge the 911 recordings and police reports to gaslight her. I finally kind of accepted. There was no way for me to help her when she'd had her paranoia turned towards me, so I said, we should just split. Sadly, this was not the end though, as about 3 weeks later, she managed to convince some idiot to try to kill me. Story 33. Due to some childhood trauma, my ex equated sympathy with love. She would create situations and start drama to put herself in the sympathetic position. Every scenario was based on lies and manipulation. Everyone heard a different story depending on her victimization scenarios. After 6 years of being responsive to her demands, she called me at work one day with a fresh batch of BS and expected me to polish up my armor, mount my white stallion, and charge off to her rescue yet again to prove my love. Something in me simply broke and I was done. I realized she was a black hole of neediness. There was never going to be enough sympathy. Therapy wasn't helping, medication wasn't helping, it was simply who she was, is. The veil had fallen and there was nothing she or anyone else could do to put things together again. She's been married 3 times since our divorce, twice to the same dude. One husband had her committed to a psych hospital for 3 months. She's lost both children she birthed. She can't hold a job because her needy manipulations extend to all areas of her life. My father put it best when he said, she's piteous. Story 34. I was young and shallow. Looks trumped personality. He was beautiful but possessive, jealous, and obsessive. He would call at all hours. He would show up at 3 a.m. just to see if anyone else was there, and other weird behavior. The kicker was when I had the flu. I was so sick. I just wanted to sleep. He called me 6 times in 30 minutes. I put the phone on silent and went to sleep. I woke up to the police banging on the door. The insecure mother ducker had the cops do a welfare check. After explaining the situation to them, the cops were irritated. They told me, in front of him, it would be a good idea to get a restraining order. I dumped him on the spot. I got the restraining order. He stalked me at work, called and texted me begging to take him back. He broke into my house once, showed up at my mom's job, and more. I had to move and get a new phone number. He eventually killed himself because his new GF left him. I was so relieved. I know, but I was finally free of this weirdo. He taught me a life lesson about personality trumping looks. Never again have I dismissed the guys who weren't traditionally attractive. Story 35. I was at work and my company had hired a new analyst. I was also an analyst at the time, so my senior director wanted me to mentor her on all things about our systems. I was excited, so I told my ex all about it. She was insanely jealous of other women, and I should have understood that any time I mentioned another woman excluding my mom, she would fly in a fit of rage about it. What was ironic about that was that every single boyfriend she'd ever been with, she wound up cheating on them. I think she was afraid I would do the same to her. Anyways, she flies into a fit of rage, tries calling me while at work. I denied the calls, but asked her why she's blowing up my phone via text. Then out comes this stream of anger and resentment about how I'm going to bang this new girl and cheat on her. We literally just met 30 minutes ago, and I've been asked to mentor her for work. In what way does that mean I'll be cheating on you with her? I don't know, it just is. I realized then and there that if she's this insecure about me and is willing to interrupt my workday on petty crap like this, how will it be if we ever married or had kids? I broke up with her via text. I couldn't handle dealing with the antics anymore. The verbal and physical abuse, the constant jealousy and rage. Story 36. She pulled a knife on me. Twice. She always had an irrational fear that some Mexican was going to come and rape her while I left for work. She would sit up like exorcist style in bed and just say, "Wasn't I supposed to take a pill? I forgot my pills." What was that pill I needed to take? She had to be up at 5:30 to be to work by 7 a.m. I tended to be up at 7 and I silently laid in bed, TV on, earpiece and watching TV in the darkened room, and her night terrors started to scare me. One day she showed she slept with a steak knife. Broad daylight, 2 separate times she went for the knife. On me. I used to travel 3 to 4 hours one way for work and would make it a 14, 16-hour day to shorten how many days I needed to work. It became untenable because she was convinced I wasn't working, but banging every associate at the places I visited for work. When I left, it became, what happened? Well, only one question for you. How was the dinner and the intimate we were apparently having, because I don't remember a thing? The number of girls I had on Facebook equaled the number of chicks I was banging. Fun fact, literally most were lesbians, which is why I dared friend them, because I knew the accusations were coming. And at least if they were lesbians, I had some cover. Nope. Lesbians like dick too. Story 37. I always had a good stable job, but she could never hold a job for very long. When she was not working, we went into debt. When she worked, we could slowly climb out of debt. Finally, she said that, because of her mental illnesses, she couldn't work anymore. Translation: she never did want to work, and now she has an excuse. That was it. After years of dragging it out, we hit the final straw. At least it was a mutual split-up. Without me as her cash cow to depend on, she had no other choice but to actually work on her mental health. We are both better off now. Story 38. Crap. It was a lot of buildup over a year period. The last straw was when I was selling my truck. It was about to be wintertime, slow dead season for my work. I asked my wife if it would be better for us to just have one vehicle over the winter and pay down some debt. Keep in mind, I was paying for both vehicles, insurance, medical, apartment, etc. Her response was, "So we are just going to add miles to my Jeep?" The brand new Jeep I bought her less than a year ago. Only married for a little over a year. I'd had enough. Told her I wanted a divorce. She was selfish, narcissistic, manipulative, and I couldn't have that around me anymore. I was mentally exhausted and felt beyond used across the board. Filed for divorce, put her on a plane 5 days later to go back to her home state. Upped her all of her crap. That was 6 months ago. Haven't heard from her in months after threatening a restraining order due to nonstop emails, personal and work, texts and calls all hours of the day. Hope she is doing good, loved her, still love her, and wish her nothing but the best. Sad and hate that it didn't work out between us. I thought we had found our person and would be together happy and best friends until the end. But expectations and reality sometimes doesn't give a duck. Story 39. When she assaulted me, punched our TV screen, threw my computer down the hall, broke the apartment main door window, and broke my phone so I couldn't call the police. All in front of our 6-month-old son. The kicker of it all was she called the police, and I was removed. Despite never having touched her. Story 40. She cheated on me with her high school boyfriend. Denied it when I found out. Then she downplayed it and said that it shouldn't have happened, but never apologized. She wanted to work through it together, but her way of working through it was to set up a new email address and start sleeping with everyone who responded to her Craigslist ads. Thanks, bye. Story 41. I found out that while I was on a business trip, she had left the kids alone, gone and gotten drunk, crashed and totaled her minivan, fled the scene, got arrested, triggered a DCF investigation into our children, used our savings to buy the exact same minivan so I wouldn't notice, then had another man call the DCF from our house to tell them that she's a great mom and there is no reason to investigate us. I was gone for 4 days. I found out months later during one of my kids' doctor appointments. Story 42. I feel finally confident enough to post here. The user is a frequent Redditor. It was several things that added up. 1. I no longer wanted to go back home. I wanted to stay out as long as possible. The home seemed like a foreign place to me. 2. Always threatening me with divorce all the time, even upon the first fight that happened days after the marriage. 3. Coming at me with a knife during the fights, threatening to kill me and throwing objects around and smashing things. Number 3 on the third time was the last straw. Told I had enough. It was over. That she had issues, and I don't think I was the problem. The person proceeded to go on Reddit, post her narrative, and people said, "Yeah, What you did was wrong, but it sounds like you're being gaslighted and he probably deserved it. I hope you're okay." Which she proceeded to show me to say that maybe I'm the problem. Those were the big things, but there was so many smaller things like constantly going through my stuff thinking she had to write, because she thought I was cheating on her and justifying that it's okay, because she had suspicion without permission, threatening to hurt herself and call the police on me, constantly telling me at faults, goes on and on. It's over and I'm now much, much happier. Story 43. He stole my credit card, maxed it out, spent the money on drink and drugs, and came home 2 days later. He passed out on the sofa, pissed himself, then put his fist through the window. I was a full-time student with no money and terrified. Took so much courage to get him out of the house. It taught me a few lessons. I am not in any way responsible for someone's mental health or actions. Story 44. I was 16 when this all happened. My father used to abuse me and my sisters. Usually I would shut up and take the beating or look away when he beat my sisters. But one time, something in me snapped. I saw my dad beating my little sister for not coming home on time, and I grabbed a kitchen knife and ran to protect my sister with thoughts of stabbing my dad. He grabbed a wooden stick that was left over from his shoddy DIY projects, and that held me off. We stared at each other as my rage slowly slips away into worry and regret. He compromised into talking things over with my sister instead of hitting her in the end, but it still left me with sorrow for my actions. Story 45. It was in my early 20s. I marry very young. The first red flag was when I found a recording device on top of the kitchen cabinets. I confronted him about it, and he claimed it was for security. I was shocked that he had installed something without my knowledge and hidden it. I only found it because I decided to clean up. The second red flag took me a couple of instances to notice. He used to randomly show up at places I was, supposedly by coincidence. However, the last straw was when after my classes at the university, I walked to my car and found him parking right next to it. That day freaked me out. I realized he was stalking me and was psychotic. I discovered he had placed a tracking device in my car. I asked for a divorce after that. If you had seen Netflix show You, he had some of that behavior, but not that extreme. Story 46. I was in the Navy. She wanted me to live on the ship and she would stay in our apartment and keep my truck because I wouldn't need it. A month later, I got orders to go to another duty station. She wanted to stay in Norfolk and have me send her all but $100, pay all the bills, and give her all the rest to live on. Yes, she was cheating on me. She was also cheating on the guy she was cheating on me with. Nope. I told her that the Navy paid me to move, and if she wanted to stay, she was on her own. 20. Some odd years later, she told me she had been diagnosed as being bipolar. She really was crazy. Story 47. I realized this 8 years ago. Any money we make, he spends immediately. 8 years ago, we did very well in cryptocurrency, and he became a spending maniac. He spent $1 million in the first 6 months. He talked and acted like it would never end. And when it became clear it was all crashing down, he was in deep denial. He got into NFTs, and I knew he was out of control. Now we have some crypto left, but it's hardly worth anything anymore. We have no retirement savings, and he watches the trading price all day long. It just goes down. It'll never go to the moon again, and he can't see that. He doesn't work, and my 20-hour full-time job isn't sustaining us. Being rich for a minute was not fun for me. Just made me realize my spouse is not mentally stable. Story 48. Kept moving trashy family members into our guest room. That didn't start until after we were married. That family had issues before with evictions and living in their cars or camping for long periods of time, but they never stayed with us. Her sister moved in for like 4 months, then after she was gone for less than 2 weeks, the mom moved in. She also kept helping them with bills. It was never my money, but it could have been used for us and not taking care of healthy family members who were bad with money. Her mom was living with us and spending like $80 on lottery tickets every payday. Luckily, we were renting, and I had to give 3 months' notice not to renew lease. About 40 days before we had to move out, I told her she could just get on a lease with her family because we were done, and I moved my stuff out. Story 49. My last straw was after 25 years of marriage. Got married young to the love of my life. Had a good couple of years, but more bad than good. At the end, I was making myself go to bed at 6 p.m. to avoid him. I would meditate until I eventually fell asleep. One day, I looked in the mirror and was like, this is ducked up. I don't want to go to bed at 6. He isn't going to change. It's time for me to make a change. Enter attorneys and divorce. I am post-divorce a year and a half. I still cry and am sad for what I lost but never really had, but I am also at peace finally. Story 50. Not me, my parents. My 7th B-Day, Dad was trying to get Mom up so they could take me out for breakfast. Dad wasn't taking no for an answer. BC, I don't care. Isn't a good enough excuse to not celebrate her kid's B-Day. I love my dad. My mom just started beating on my dad out of nowhere. I saw it all. Dad called the cops and my mom pulled me aside and told me to lie for her and tell the police he was beating her. I didn't. She got arrested. Dad filed for divorce that day. Active custody battle took almost a decade. My dad is happily married now, 3rd time is the charm. Story 51. Was into a girl at work and we went on several dates. There were a lot of red flags before this, mostly her trying to tell stories that made her seem cool, like a one-upper type of situation, which I had kind of blew off because I figured she was just nervous or something. But then she told me how when she lived in New Mexico, her and her friends would basically kidnap homeless Native Americans, beat them up, and drop them off way across town or in the middle of nowhere. I guess my face said it all because she tried to backtrack and justify it by saying how all New Mexicans hated Native Americans, and I wouldn't understand how terrible they are. I'm not ashamed to say that I got a new job and just ghosted her. Story 52. He was unreachable for days in a foreign country. I contacted the U.S. Embassy, his Airbnb host, and was in contact with the police there. I thought he was dead until I get a casual phone call from him at the airport. When I asked him what the hell happened, he was too exhausted to discuss it right then. After fighting about me not picking him up, I stupidly caved and went to get him. Of course, we got into it about where he had been, and when I asked what drugs he was on, he told me, "That's none of your business." I had been in a full-blown crying panic attack distraught state for days. And it's not my business? I informed him that our marriage was over. Story 53. I made the mistake of marrying a woman who had trauma from being cheated on unexpectedly after 8 years of marriage. Although she hid it at first, she got progressively more jealous as the marriage went on. She would drink and then started going through my phone and accusing me of having long conversations with girls. These girls were Tracy and Stacy, both old military buddies, men I have known for 20-plus years. The problem is she would forget because she was drinking, and the cycle would continue in a few months with her seeing Tracy or Stacy on my phone and getting jealous again. A few cycles of that, and I was done. I was out of that house the next day in 2 ARs. Story 54. I knew it was over when my mom told me she was 90% he was cheating on me. This was at my graduation from boot camp, BTW. And I didn't care. It was like, oh, cool, whatever. But the moment I was like, duck it, was when he spent $600+ at a liquor store, then tried to lie and say he didn't do it even though the credit card company had faxed me a receipt showing his signature on it. Then, when he finally did admit to it, he was like, what about that $20 flat iron you bought? I immediately got off the phone with him, called the bank to move my paycheck to a new account, and then called a divorce lawyer. Story 55. She once turned to me, looked me dead in the eyes, and told me that her favorite part of sucking dick was that she could just bite it off at any time. This was just a random thing she said at a stoplight. Craziest crap. She got a kitten on a whim and gave it to our 5-yo kid. Yay. Cute cat. Right? About a week later, she stepped in cat pee and immediately threw the cat through the back door and off our 3rd-story balcony. The cat flew past the kiddo on its flight out. Also, she stabbed me once. But that seems kind of ordinary in retrospect. Story 56. Not married, but we were together for 5 years. When I was struggling to get a job fresh out of university and money was tight, he repeatedly suggested I become a high-class escort. He was dead serious and offered to manage my income and drive me around to see clients. He came from a wealthy background and had a master's degree in a highly technical field, but he was insane and abusive and too proud to ask for money from his parents to help out. He probably didn't really care about the money. It was all a game to see how far he could push me. Story 57. He had untreated ADHD. When he got upset, he would smack himself in the face. I never saw that before we got married. I remember trying to talk to him during one of his episodes, and he turned to me with a creepy smile and said, "You haven't seen anything yet." That, and the fact he was addicted to gambling and cleaned out our, at least it was small, emergency fund, promised he'd stop. Repeat. Story 58. My ex-wife blatantly making fun of me in front of people I'd never met before, because I was knocking out prerequisites to get into nursing school. 11 years later, I'm married to a nurse, earned my master's degree, and am an elementary school counselor. I realized I needed lots of math for nursing. I ducking hate math. My ex lives with her parents and works at a gas station. Story 59. Headed out of state to spend time with family, and through security alerts to my phone notice she unplugged the cameras outside inside. But she didn't think about how they run on emergency battery power for a month? Literally videos sent to my phone of her bringing random folks, some I've met, some not, into the house and sleeping with them, and talking in detail on camera about group intimate scenarios and hoping I wouldn't find out. Turns out she lied to me a lot and was good at it. Story 60. Mine is way less interesting than most of these. I just couldn't have a single conversation with the woman without it being a conflict of some kind. Every single thing from "what do you want to eat tonight" to more in-depth discussions about the kids or bills always was a fight, and she was usually taking swings at me that were completely unnecessary. She also is incredibly impulsive and bought a car with a nearly $800 a-month car payment that we couldn't afford, and that didn't help either. Story 61. Getting trash drunk and throwing dishes on a Saturday night, and then going to church the next morning and raising her hands in the air with that creepy Jesus stuff. She was a raging, abusive alcoholic, yet wanted to be seen as a model Christian. Not only did I leave her, I've never stepped foot in a church again, and I've never been happier. Story 62. He always told me I couldn't do it alone with 3 kids. He moved out to Pa to get us set up for retirement. I stayed here for my youngest to finish high school. While the ex was gone, I realized I could do it by myself. My kids were 23, 21, and 18 when we divorced. 8 years, and I never looked back. Story 63. After she cheated on me while I was going through a hard bout of depression, and despite paying all her bills, which I was willing to see past it and work to rebuild our marriage, she started claiming that I intimately abused her for the duration of our marriage, even before the marriage. It was hard to see past my depressed brain fog, and the divorce is pretty nasty. But glad it's behind me now. Story 64. He never expressed any intimational desire toward me the entirety of our marriage. Left me alone on my wedding night, would get mad when I wanted to discuss it, saying I made him feel guilty while I was suffering for intimacy. Then decided after 2 years to ask me, "Why don't we try for a baby?" You're crazy, dude. Story 65. The smear campaign started years ago to our kids. Then his 2 enablers, he made up stories I was dangerous. He has DV. Then trying to have me arrested after he assaults me, and looking up engagement ring. He smashed first wife head into car dash years ago, I found out recently, and had audacity to try to have her arrested. He was chasing 20-year-old. Thank you all for watching. Watch even more great stories on my channel.